Good day, writers. My name is Jordan. Welcome to the Writer's Room. Today, we're talking about stakes and why your story needs them. Before we get started here today, I would like to offer a quick disclaimer of sorts. In this episode, I'll be referencing some classic movies to help illustrate a few of my points about how stakes shape our stories. Because these stories being referenced are films, their particular stakes exist within the context of screenwriting. However, these basic principles apply to any type of creative writing, whether it's on the screen, the stage, or the page. With that out of the way, let's talk about stakes.
Did somebody say steaks?
Sorry, bro. Different kind of stakes. What I'm referring to are things that are at stake in a story. For example, what's at stake if Superman doesn't thwart the plans of the evil Lex Luthor, or what's at stake if a college student oversleeps and misses their final exam. As writers, we need to make sure that our stories have appropriate stakes. Here's a few ways we can do that. Number 1, establish your stakes early. The stakes of your story don't have to be life or death, end of the world stakes, but no matter what they are, they should be made known early. A lot of superhero movies, for instance, establish the stakes within the very first scene. The earlier you establish your stakes, the earlier your audience will invest in your story. Once you've got them hooked, they'll follow you all the way to the end. Number 2, raise the stakes. Once you've established your stakes, it's important to raise them as your story goes on, or else they'll become boring and stagnant. There are a few ways we can make sure this doesn't happen. One way is to ask a couple questions. What is the worst thing that can happen in this situation? Or what is the most difficult obstacle for my protagonist to overcome in order to reach their goal? Answering these questions can raise the stakes and generate great ideas for the rest of your story. Another way to raise stakes in an interesting way is to give them a time limit. An example would be like a ticking time bomb that's going to blow up a big city in an action movie. The closer that clock gets to 0, the more intense the stakes are going to feel to the audience, or in your case, the reader. It doesn't have to be an actual time bomb, but just find some way to raise the stakes, and your story will be better off for it. And finally, number 3, it's important to remember that stakes are about characters. This one is pretty simple to understand, but it can actually be pretty difficult to execute. The basic idea is this: if no one cares about your characters, no one's going to care about your stakes. An exciting plot full of explosions and craziness is great and all, but nothing's going to draw in your readers like a compelling and interesting character. Think about some of the most iconic characters of all time, like Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker. If Harry Potter wasn't a compelling character, then we, as viewers and readers, wouldn't care if he was killed by he who must not be named. Likewise, if we weren't invested in the character of Luke Skywalker, it wouldn't be as painful for us to watch him get barbecued by Darth Sidious's Force lightning.
Did somebody say barbecue?
If your characters don't matter, then your stakes don't matter. If your stakes don't matter, then your story doesn't matter. Make sense? Before we wrap things up here, let's do a brief recap. Number 1, establish your stakes early. Hook your audience from the beginning and they will stay with you for the whole ride. Number 2, raise the stakes. Don't let your stakes grow stagnant. Find some way to ramp them up as your story progresses. And finally, number 3, remember stakes are all about characters. People relate to interesting and compelling characters. If your characters are flat and boring, no one's going to care what happens to them. And thus concludes this episode of The Writer's Room. I genuinely hope it helped you in your writing journey. If you have any questions or comments, or you just want to say hey, please feel free to send me an email, which is listed in the description box below. Have a fantastic day, and until we meet again, get to writing, will ya? I'll see you next time.